Thank you, and good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you for being here. This press conference obviously is about the recent survey results that were released by the Bureau of Statistics. It is unfortunate that actually the Fiji Bureau of Statistics had released the results of the 2019-2020 Household and Expenditure Survey with ethnic and religious breakdown, and I'll highlight why this is so. Frankly, even before that, I want to highlight that, in fact, the results without the ethnic categorization of this survey was released in February of this year, which a number of you media organizations, in fact, covered. And a number of political parties actually commented on it. So the statistics in respect of the poverty levels, etc., were put out. It was, in fact, talked about even in Parliament, I understand, and various comments were made on it. However, this report that came out just recently did a breakdown along ethnic and religious lines. There was a sample of 6,000 households from 99,688 households. So 6,000 households on 199,688 households, or 3% of the population. Now, the question that needs to ask was, how is this sample size derived from these 6,000 households on the basis of ethnicity? There is absolutely no demarcated. So if, for example, if here, all of you are standing here in this room, and we decide to take a sample of some of you to indicate what are your poverty levels, if I only chose, say if we choose 5 people, and I chose 4 people who are Itaukei, and 1 person who's Indo-Fijian, or I chose 4 people who are Indo-Fijian and 1 person who's Itaukei, my results would be very different. So what was the basis on which they derived the sample size from? That we need to be able to question. Now, this report also, if you see, I hope some of you have read this report and not just simply regurgitating what people are making comments on. There's a map here that actually shows in red where the samples were taken from. And if you look at it, a lot of the sample areas in the interior, for example, here in Viti Levu, or in the rural areas. In the maritime areas, of course, it's there. Also within Vanuatu. Now, we know how the population in Fiji is distributed. So if you go to certain areas, there's a proclivity of particular ethnic groups to live in those areas too. So we need to be able to understand that. In the same way, if you go to certain parts of Viti Levu, they don't grow sugarcane. But other parts of Viti Levu, they grow sugarcane. You go to certain parts in Vanuatu, they'll grow yangona. But other parts in Viti Levu, they don't grow yangona. So depends on where and how you take your samples from and when. So again, there's a flaw in that. Now, on page 2 of this actual report, it says that the HIES was a national survey covering sample areas, and the 2017 population and housing census data was used as a survey frame. If they are basing it on the 2017 population census, then the 2017 census had no reliable ethnic data, as you know from the 2017 census. As the former government statistician in his statement said that the sample results on ethnicity would clearly be not representative of the population. So FBOS, using the sample results to infer ethnic breakdown of population statistics, is highly questionable and indeed very unreliable. And on that matter, let me quote what the former statistician, Mr. Epeli Wangavonovono, said on the 5th of March 2018. This is in relation to the 2017 census. He says, and I quote, "There was no reliable collection of data on ethnicity in the 2017 census. As a result, no data on ethnicity could be accurately aggregated or released as part of the 2017 census. There was a question on ethnicity passed in the census questionnaire. However, During a review of the data and methods of collection, we uncovered a number of anomalies in the way data on ethnicity was collected that severely compromised the objectivity and completeness of the data set on ethnicity. It was found that many enumerators, people going around collecting the samples, failed to verbally ask for their respondents' ethnic background. Instead, the data was collected based on the enumerator's observed assumption of the respondent's ethnicity. Many enumerators also assumed the entire household's ethnicity based on one household member, failing to account for households with multiple ethnicities. You know, in Fiji there are many people who have inter-ethnic marriages. So if I come to the door and I see somebody who's in my mind an Itoke, should I assume that everybody in that household is an Itoke? If I come to the door and I see an Indo-Fijian, should I then assume that everybody in the household is Indo-Fijian? Or, as unfortunately, this report talks about others. And we've seen the questionnaire. And the questionnaire does not, for example, have a breakdown or categorization of people of what we may call part Indo-Fijian, part Itoke. It just assumes what we call full ethnicities of people. And the former government statistician goes on to say, it was also reported by enumerators that many respondents refused to disclose their ethnic background. Fortunately, we've not seen these issues in the collection of any other data sets as part of the 2017 census. The remaining unreleased data from the 2017 census is still being aggregated and will be released in due time. So there's a number of flaws. I mean, again, for example, as I explained to you, normally when you have this type of segregated data, if you call it, you normally have a full detailed methodology that's set out. This has only 2 pages, and not even full pages. It's filled with graphs and a diagram as to the methodology of it. So the reality of the matter is it has not delved deeply into how they assumed that from this 6,000 they have some form of representation of the different ethnic groups. It could be very much skewed. Now, there's also some very basic mistakes. If you look at, for example, it says the selected 7 divisions that they have. And it says on this page that according to this page, there are 191,910 households in Fiji. Immediately the page after that, it says there are 199,688 households in Fiji. So which one is it? This is supposed to be the Fijian Bureau of Statistics, giving us accurate statistics. But such a basic thing they got wrong. Now, when these results came out earlier this year, which you covered, you know, it was released on the 8th of February, that provided all the details on the poverty statistics, including the poverty rate of 29.9%. We actually accepted the results, welcomed the results, even though it showed that 1/3 of the Fijian households were below the poverty line, because we need to know the statistics. We, of course, appreciate any independent office carrying out a proper, professional, independent analysis of any data and understand the importance of reliable, timely, and accurate statistics. And many of you may not know this, or many may not actually delve further into this. We, in fact, approved this new methodology of moving away from what we call using the traditional income measure for welfare analysis to using consumption expenditure for poverty measurement. From income measure to consumption expenditure for poverty measurement basis. This was welcome because we believe it would be an improvement in the methodology for measuring poverty accurately and would better assist in policy making. So you don't just look at how much money you earn, but you need to look at, for example, whether you have access to services. So this includes things like, for example, access to subsidized electricity, access to transportation, subsidized transportation. So even though I may be, for example, living in a rural area, I may be able to feed myself. I don't necessarily need to go and buy my cassava or buy my bhindi or my bhaji, because I grow it myself. So I do have access to food. The previous methodology was depending on how much money you had in your pocket. And a lot of people actually are able to have access to food, have access to various other amenities because they either grow the food themselves, or, for example, there's government assistance provided, not in terms of cash, but in terms of other facilities or amenities, with subsidy of electricity or water or transportation. However, given now that FBOS has released the ethnic and religious breakdown of HIES, we are very concerned about it. Firstly, the data cannot be relied upon. And there is huge integrity issues in respect of how they chose the sample, in respect of indeed what the sample was. We're not giving any other details apart from these 2 pages, half of which are diagrams. It also, to make it clear, we're not in any way challenging poverty statistics. We want to know as much about it as possible. We want to address the issue of poverty. We spend over $100 million a year just simply in giving poverty benefit scheme, under the poverty benefit scheme, whether it's rural pregnant women, whether it's providing the food vouchers, whether it's in respect of providing funding for disabled persons, whether it's in social pensions for those people who live in the rural areas, in the villages, in the farms, who've never worked for anybody and have now retired, but now we give them $100 a month because they don't have FNPF. All of these schemes we've introduced. We give people access to free transportation or subsidized transportation. Now, what we actually are challenging are 2 things. Firstly, the reliability of these kind of statistics. And secondly, it has now exposed FBOS that they are now carrying out ethnic analysis based on a very flawed system. And indeed, philosophically, we are opposed. Philosophically, we are opposed to putting ethnicity and religion to poverty. It's a big issue. If you're going to start having compassion for people based on their ethnicity, then you're losing your sense of humanity. And that's precisely what has happened. If you look at the press releases put out by some of the political parties, they've immediately jumped on the ethnic bandwagon or religious bandwagon. It is highly, highly improper, we believe, to do so. It is highly improper to do, for example, a religious breakdown on poverty. Highly improper. And more fundamentally, even if you do want to do it, which we don't, the methodology you've used is in fact flawed. The methodology is completely flawed. Now, over the last few years, we've been very steadfast in ensuring it is government policy. The Bureau of Statistics knows this. And this is why it is even more of a problem when FBOS has gone off and done this on its own accord. In fact, it is a breach of Section 5 of the relevant law in place. And if you look, again, those of you who want to get into investigative journalism, and I know that's not very, a lot of people don't want to get into that. If you look at Section 5 of the Act, it says, with the approval and the direction of the Minister, the government statistician shall collect in Fiji any part thereof statistics relating to any of the matters set out in Schedule 1. Schedule 1 has 20 areas in which the government statistician can go and get information on. No problems. If they want to go outside the scope, they should be able to come and refer, as provided for in the Act, to the relevant minister. And we have continuously said, recently, for example, there was a census done through the Ministry of Agriculture using FBOS for agriculture statistics. How many subsistence farmers do we have? How many semi-agricultural farmers we have? How many farmers are planting dalo, cassava, yangona, Vegetables, how many of them are exporting? But guess what? We found, before they went out, somebody snuck in ethnicity into it. What is the relevance of ethnicity and religion into seeing your agricultural output? You want to know how much dollar we produce in a year. Who grows it, whether it's Ram Prasad or whether it's Pennyasi, it does not matter. Whether it's a Roman Catholic or Methodist or Hindu or Muslim or Baha'i or Confucian, does not matter. From a national perspective, we need to be able to focus on those areas. I mean, very soon these people want statistics on what kind of ethnic breakdown we have on doctors, nurses. When you go into a hospital, you want the best doctor to serve you. When your family members are sick, you want the best doctor to serve you. You don't say, oh, I'm a Hindu, I want a Hindu doctor. Or I'm a Christian, I want a Christian doctor. Or I'm a Muslim, I want a Muslim doctor. You say, who is the doctor who can help me the best? And unfortunately, given our history in this country, where every issue, everything has been brought down to the banal basis of ethnicity and religion, it has pushed us backward. So the government is philosophically opposed to this. In fact, the World Bank that helped the Bureau of Statistics in crunching some numbers, not formally but informally they're involved, we were told, we spoke to them today, they themselves had highlighted the sensitivities around ethnic and religious categorization. They themselves were concerned about that. So, the reality of the matter, ladies and gentlemen, is I've highlighted, the CEO of FBOS has not acted in line with government policy and Section 5 of the Act itself. And of course, that's a separate matter that needs to be dealt with. But we also want to highlight, please, look at the more important statistics from this report. Look at how many people, for example, live on leased land. How many people live as squatters? These are the statistics that's very important to us. How many people, live in rural areas and urban areas, peri-urban areas, where there is transportation, there is no transportation, who has access to transportation, how many cars there are. All those statistics are very important for national planning. And this government believes in assisting all Fijians that need assistance, not on the basis of ethnicity or religion or province or what school you went to. Every deserving Fijian will get the assistance. So, ladies and gentlemen, I wanted to highlight these issues pertaining to this survey results. Of course, some of the media organizations are going to town with it without actually thinking about it. And it's quite interesting that some of the language being used seem to be very similar across many of the commentators. They all seem to be singing from the same song sheet. And again, missing out the point that when you have a country that's been so much politicized along the lines of ethnicity and, of course, now religion, that you won't be able to progress forward. We won't be able to get assistance to the right people if you're going to have every single decision of yours based on ethnicity and religion. Common and equal citizenry means, equality of citizenry means that everybody that deserves assistance will get assistance. So if in one point in time everybody in the maritime areas will need assistance, we'll give it to them. Nobody should be able to come and say to us, oh, they're only assisting the Itoke people, because most people live in the maritime areas are Itoke people. They need the assistance, they will get it. If there is a group of people who have become landless and they need assistance, we go and help them. Nobody should be able to say, oh, they're only helping Indo-Fijians. They need the assistance at that point in time, they will get it. If there are people who are squatters and all sorts of ethnic groups and religious groups are there, we will help them. But unfortunately, there are many people in this country, and unfortunately, this FBOS report directly fits very neatly into that agenda of ethnic categorization, religious categorization, is a huge step backwards. So we ask you to be able to focus on the key issues, and that's what government will continue to do so. Thank you. So do you have any questions?
Good evening, sir. It's Corey from FBC News. Just along the lines of the survey, you did mention that the data cannot be relied upon due to the segregation of how the survey was conducted along the lines of race and also religious lines as well. Does this mean that the survey altogether is not valid, or is it we can still rely upon certain information that was published in the survey?
As I said, when the survey came out in February of this year, we didn't object to it. I mean, obviously there could have been some issues with it, but overall, we thought that was fine. As I said, that you cannot compare this survey to other household and income expenditure surveys. The reason why, because the methodology of assessing that previously was based on income methodology. This is now consumption. So they're different. And even if you look at various other studies in the world, World Bank and other groups have helped other Pacific island countries to move from income to consumption. They've said you cannot compare that. So it'll take a couple of years, or a couple other surveys, I should say, to get the base right. And we recognize that. We need to get that right. There may be some flaws here and there, but we went along with it. 29% poverty rate. We need to move along with it. Now, so it was an improved methodology, it's a better way of capturing, true poverty, if you like. What we are saying, though, is that to then transpose that into some sort of ethnic categorization is completely incorrect. Because on what basis have they done so? What's the base that they have used? What reference of the population have they used? I've quoted to you the statement by the former government statistician who said that any ethnic categorization from the 2017 census cannot be relied upon for all those reasons that I highlighted. So this 6,000 sample which they've gone and done, how did they choose people? Where did they choose them from exactly? The map obviously is showing it, and it obviously shows a particular skewing of where they got the samples from. And secondly, what percentage? So for example, if you say, like the example that I gave now, if we want to sample, like this is the entire population of Fiji, and if you want to get a sample, and if I just chose 3 people in the corner, depending on what, if you want to go on religious or ethnic lines, all 3 of them could be Christians. Or maybe 3 Christians and 1 Muslim, or 1 Hindu. Then you would say, if out of the 3 Christians, 2 of them are poor, and the 3rd one is another Christian, and the 4th one is a Muslim, then you'd say 50% of the Itauke population in Fiji are poor. Or if you flip it around, Indo-Fijians being 3 and the others being 1. So that's the point. Where did they get this source from? And the Mr. Wangavonovono highlighted the problems with the questionnaire and how many of the enumerators just simply looked at you, they assume that you are this particular ethnic group. So that's what we are questioning. The results that came out in February, it's fine, there's some flaws there, but we live with it. Even though we criticize and people said, oh, where's the boom and all of that? But we said, no, that's the statistics. We've come out with a new methodology, it better captures it, and let's work on that. We used that. We looked at the various, demarcators, for example, like I said, access to transportation, access to various services, and let's work on that. But to now bring this another level to it without getting the fundamentals right is absolutely flawed. You see, if people were actually quite keen on addressing these issues, people who are concerned about national interests and concerned about the future, they would actually look at the methodology. They would actually say, no, this is actually flawed. What's the base that you've used? But because it suits their political agenda, they've jumped on it. Our Prime Minister has made it clear on several occasions that the bane of our society, the bane of our political life, the bane of our democracy since 1970 has been our obsession with ethnicity. That's why we've not progressed. Countries that had a lower GDP than us, they've moved along. Countries like Mauritius and Singapore, they've moved far ahead of us, even though they were behind us in the 1960s, Because they've gone over that obsession and focused on national issues, and we've been left behind. That's his philosophy, that's the philosophy of the government. And unfortunately, we have, organizations like this trying to pull us back.
Naka, Mr. Sayed-Khaiyum, Inoki here from the Fiji Sun. You had mentioned that the current statistics that had been released by the Bureau of Statistics cannot be relied upon or is flawed. What measures or what ways would government take to ensure that this is not repeated?
Well, look, I think the fact of the matter is that what I said was that the way that they've derived the sample and how they've come to ethnic and religious conclusions, what we've said, obviously, it's flawed. They've not described it, the methodology is not correct, not enough details have been given. And how do we ensure it does not happen? Obviously, we will talk to the various people within the Bureau of Statistics. We ask them to also adhere to the law itself. And hopefully things will improve. I think the leadership of the Bureau of Statistics needs to take a hard look at itself too.
Sidhu from Fiji TV. Does the report question the basis on how enumerators are recruited, trained before they are sent out to the ground?
Yeah, I think the statement by Mr. Wangavonovono, the former government statistician, if you his quote, is obviously some of it has to do with training, some of it has to do with just simply people's prejudices. They may look at you and they may say, oh, he's part Tongan. You know what I mean? So people just sort of make an assumption. So all of it boils down to training. I think training is very pivotal in this respect. And then, but the point also is that why do you need to have that kind of statistics? In particular, if it's not going to give you any value or be constructive by deriving those kind of statistics, will it constructively help us address the issue of poverty? That's the main issue.
Thank you. Good evening, Shanil here from Fiji Village. Sir, I have a question released. Released by a statement by the USP Students Association, who are saying that the lack of funding is affecting their students, and obviously, majority of them a large number of them are Fijian students. So they're calling for the USP grants to be released immediately. Just wanted to get your comments on their statement, sir.
We've already made a comment on that. What our position is. We have said that there needs to be an inquiry in the various anomalies that have been highlighted by the Pro-Chancellor, Winston Thompson, in the chair of the Audit and Risk Committee, to ensure that there's transparency, because there's no transparency in the way that USP is currently conducted, in the way that appointments are made, in the way some of the finances are actually being dealt with. And from a good governance perspective, we need to ensure there's proper transparency. Until such time, we won't release the funds. That's the position of government. Okay? That's it? Naka, thank you.